Hey, good morning, everybody. It is like 6 o'clock or 5:30. I don't know. I can't tell. I'm looking at my watch and I don't have my glasses on. So anyway, it's about 5:30, 6 o'clock on I don't know. What's today? Tuesday. I have a doctor's appointment this morning, so I'm already up. I have a doctor's appointment this morning, but I couldn't sleep. That's why I'm already up. So I decided to get up and get dressed, get my coffee. Wanted to show you the early morning porch. I saw red sky, so maybe it's red sky this morning. So it's what is that saying? Red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. So probably bad weather today. What some people think of as bad weather. I love rain personally, so because I'm from Oregon. So when I grew up in Oregon, Western Oregon, and people there are pretty used to the rain, no doubt. Sorry for my appearance today. I'm not woken up, so but I do have coffee. Oh, it's good. So the coffee I drink, I'm a big fan of coffee, and the coffee I drink, my little brother has a. This is the first time I'm doing a plug for a company. I'm not going to get paid for it or anything like that because he offered, but I said no thanks. But anyway, his wife is from Guatemala, and her father is actually a famous coffee taster. I never realized that was a thing. That's when you know you've had a good life and you somehow become a coffee taster. But her father is a famous coffee taster from Guatemala, and so he works directly with the farmers and basically coaches them on what kinds of things they need to do differently, and then tells companies that he's working for, uh, you know, what is available in the market there, and as far as the different flavors and stuff like that. They have some really interesting coffees down there. Anyway, my brother's coffee company is called Guatemalan Gold, and I'll try to, like, in the description or whatever, put more information about his coffee company. But he was in the Navy for a long time, or he retired out of it. And one of the things that he mastered while he was in the Navy was Spanish. And so I'm afraid he's as white as I am, but he speaks Spanish like a native. You can't apparently, according to many people, you can't tell he's not a first language Spanish speaker. And so he worked for the Navy, in specifically naval intelligence, signal intelligence, where that they were working to deal with the cartels. Um, but in his travels that way, he spent quite a bit of time in Central and South America, and met his wife through somehow through that, I believe. Um, but anyway, the coffee company is called Guatemalan Gold, and it's kind of a play on words because um, her maiden name is Escobar, and her father's name so is Escobar, which they all thought was funny. I mean, Escobar apparently down there is not a very uncommon name, and so it just so happens there was an Escobar that was pretty famous for his gold stuff. So they call it Guatemalan gold, which I find is hilarious. But I will say this: the best coffee I've ever tasted in my entire life was from Mexico. Just having it, and I've lifelong been a person who would drink like cream and sugar in my coffee, kind of a thing. And that coffee was so good, the one I had in Mexico, that I literally could not bring myself to put anything in it. It was just so good by itself. Which I'm not. I'm not a black coffee drinker. I love coffee, but I don't like it black. I also don't like it to be 3,000 calories a drink, so I try not to go crazy with it. But some like almond milk, sweet cream is what I usually put in. It's not a ton of sugar, and no dairy is my favorite. I don't have a dairy problem, but it's not as good for you. drinking too much dairy gives you more calcium than you need in your body, which is a thing. And also, um, it contributes tremendously to your LDLs and your cholesterol. So that's all been a learning curve for me. Anyway, coffee, love. And an excellent coffee is Guatemalan Gold, and it's her father, my sister-in-law's father, is the man who sources it directly from different farms that he's been working with his whole life, his whole professional life. And they have some amazing techniques. I'm going nerdy on coffee now, so I got to stop that because otherwise this whole talk will be on coffee, which is easy to do. So I'm going to cover a few things today just for fun. This is not an educational one or anything like that. This is just for fun. I am going to start an educational series again. I did a how to start a business series. If anybody ever wants to reach out to me and get any kind of coaching, I do that for free. It's just for fun, and I want people to succeed. I also do have a business management consulting business where that I help underperforming businesses turn their stuff around, and it's always kind of the same stuff. There's a little recipe of businesses that have gone wrong or that have dropped the ball. The statistics on having a business succeed are terrible, but 80% of all businesses, for instance, 80% of all businesses fail within the first year. And about 60% of everything that's left, that 20% that's left, 60% don't make it to 5 years. So the statistics are bad. Having your own business is not easy. And once in a while, somebody's business, even if it's been around for a while, and it could be pretty good size, can have, I used to work with property management companies. And you can have a company as large as Greystar or Monarch have like a region somewhere in the country. A region is usually 5 or 6 properties. A property can be 250 apartments. And you can have a region that's underperforming. So it's, you've got your mortgage on it and stuff like that. I worked for a property one time. Their mortgage was $195,000 a month. No, it was $95,000 a month. And I just thought that was insane. $95,000 a month. You really had to make a lot of money. I mean, it was a mathematical thing. You had to make enough money to make that property pay for not just the mortgage, and not just all the amenities and the utilities and stuff, but it had to be profitable and it had to pay wages, and stuff like that. So when a property is underperforming, it can kill a business. I mean, my wife does that now specifically for her company, and it's amazing to watch her work. And while she was doing that, I realized actually I knew as much about it as she did, and I just had never, she has 2 master's degrees. I have one, and one of her master's degrees it's called performance improvement. And so it's basically going to a company and saying, the communication between this department and this department is bad, and because of that, it's throwing you behind. And sometimes it's communication over the entire company is bad, which is the number one thing in the recipe book that causes a company to underperform is bad communication. But anyway, I fixed that in my consulting business. So if anybody happens to see this and wants somebody to teach them how to start a business, I can do that. But if somebody wants to teach them how to make their business more successful, I can do that too. I'll put some stuff in the description maybe about that too. The coffee company, and I'm adding it up in my head. The coffee company and the my consulting business. So this is not going to be a big educational thing. It's just going to be just for fun thing for me, basically. And I'm out here in the early morning in Iowa. The sky was kind of pretty a minute ago, but now it's turning gray. which figures. I won't show you that because everybody's seen some gray skies in their time. That's one of the theories of life, isn't it? You got to go through some gray skies before you appreciate the sunshine, I guess. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a tiny little list of my favorite creators. I usually use YouTube, but some of them are from they're all on YouTube now, but some of them are from TikTok and different ones, and you guys really should think about these. Some of them are comedy type stuff. Some of them are like news type stuff. Some of them are news but with a military twist to it. The reason I'm saying that is because a few of them are from the military. 2 of them are actually still in the military, and they do their own private, in their basement at home or whatever, podcasts, where they're like news. And so they're mixing a lot of military experience stuff, which is fun for me because I've been it my whole life, either when when I'm growing up at a very military family, and then when I got into the military, and then even after I got out, I wanted back in pretty quickly because like less than a year after I got out was the first time we went into Iraq actually. And I'm like, damn it, I went back in. But by that time, the military was scaling down after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and they weren't taking prior service anymore. So I've told that story on here before. Find that video if you're interested, or message me, and I'll tell it again. Anyway, it's a saga. So my favorite creators, some of them. My number one favorite creator is David Boomer. Now his name is actually David Clayton, and he's out of North Carolina. And in my opinion, as far as I can tell, he's one of the best human beings in existence today. He seems to be a man of integrity. He's never been in the military, but you'd never know it. He carries himself exactly like everybody I've ever known that spent any time in the military. Like I said, I grew up in it. And, my people were all lifers, and at minimum, everybody was involved. My great-grandfathers were in World War I. My grandfathers were in World War II, and it just went on from there. My father was in the Cold War, damn near lost his life. All of his friends died same day, but he, just by sheer luck, didn't get killed, which I'm grateful for because I was born just a few months later. So, but David Boomer, or David Clayton, he's known, you can find him as David Boomer on either like TikTok or the one I'm on. Ginger Billy is hilarious. He's a comedian. Ginger Billy. He's out of South Carolina, and I've been telling him, I'm not a real big political guy, except things are getting kind of weird now. But anyway, I've been telling Ginger Billy lately that I think he should run for Congress in South Carolina, which I'm going to get the whole East Coast. Let me know who I need to promote. Anyway, Ginger Billy's hilarious. His name's Bill, obviously, Billy, but I have no idea what his last name is, and that's probably smart on his part. But his Ginger Billy, the nickname Ginger Billy is pretty well known, and he's a pretty successful comedian. Travels the country on a regular basis doing that. So I highly recommend looking up Ginger Billy. Another one is Sean Ryan. Now, zillions of people know Sean Ryan, who he is. Sean Ryan is as popular basically as Joe Rogan, except Joe Rogan is kind of the Jerry Springer of modern day podcasts. Okay, so midget lesbian hookers, that used to be nuns or something. He's got some weird shit on there. I used to be really entertained by it, but he went a little too MAGA for my taste. I'm not MAGA, by the way. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, never have been. I've always kind of voted for whoever the smartest person was at the time, or the best person was at the time. And I've almost always been happy that my people got elected, only twice ever. since my years of voting have the people I voted for not won. So either I'm really good or I'm just really lucky. So Sean Ryan, the Sean Ryan Show. He's a former Navy SEAL for 14 years. So he was, again, somebody I grew up around people like him and people that were involved in the intelligence community, the naval intelligence community, more so than I realized at the time. But I found out later that this is why they sounded like that, because it's what they all did. Nobody told me back then, though, or anybody else for that matter, I guess. The term quiet professional used to really, really, really be a thing in the Navy. Probably still is, I don't know. So Sean Ryan, I really admire him. And you know what I admire most about Sean Ryan? I was not I try not to focus too much on politics, but I was not a big fan of the fact that he was a MAGA person. I'm not a MAGA person, and I never voted for Donald Trump. I never hated Donald Trump, but I knew he was definitely not the best person for the job. I was never a big fan of Hillary. Well, I was a big fan of Hillary Clinton back in the 90s because I thought she was brilliant. But something changed in her over the years. Probably Bill's never-ending cheating probably started that, But sometimes I think Washington eats people up and it spits them out. And I think that she was a really idealistic kid, I think, as smart as a whip. But then at some point became an elitist because she, married to a guy that was, very highly educated, very smart person, and then married to a guy who was a really highly educated person and got into politics. She was the governor's wife, and then she was the president's wife, and no, like I say, not a dim light bulb herself. And at some point, she forgot what it was like to be a normal human being. And God, I wish she would have somehow. Nancy Pelosi is another one that reminds me of that. I admire her very much. She in the being a woman in that time period in any industry was amazing, but to rise to her level was amazing too. But and believes mostly in all the things I believe in, except that both of them, Hillary and Nancy, learned to love the greed factor too much for me. Insider trading is a big thing in Washington, where that people find out shit that nobody else knows, and then they invest in the right way because of sneaky upfront information that they have that that nobody else has, which is cheating, in my opinion. But both of them became extraordinarily wealthy. I don't know if they started out that way, but they became that if they weren't, and they forgot what it was like to be normal, But otherwise, I really admire them, and I brought Hillary Clinton because she ran against Donald Trump. I voted for Hillary Clinton only because I knew Donald Trump would be a nightmare in 2016. I knew exactly why she lost, and exactly why Donald Trump won. So picking it apart, I wasn't as shocked as a lot of people were. I didn't think that Donald Trump was going to win. He didn't think he was going to win. When they told him he won, he was actually, I saw the video of it, he was actually shocked. And didn't know for sure if he even wanted it. I don't think he even planned on being president. I think he planned on running and using that as a way to further his, get him even more exposure on the international stage to help his business, which was in trouble at the time. But anyway, I'm not here to bash anybody or promote anybody that way. I'm just saying I would have I would have liked to have seen Hillary win over Donald Trump, because this whole domino thing that's happening right now, it's a very long con that's happening, and it was just one piece of that, but it had to fall. And if Hillary had won, it wouldn't have fallen. So, and Donald Trump kept trying, so he would have probably kept trying, but I suspect he would have failed. If he had failed in 2016, he would have continued to fail. But Anyway, so Sean Ryan, somebody I admire, and the reason I brought that up was because Sean Ryan was a MAGA guy, and Sean Ryan's pretty religious. You know, he's very influenced. He lives in Tennessee. Maybe he's always been there his whole life, kind of a thing, other than the military. I don't know. But he's influenced by evangelicals, I believe. And so he was pretty invested with Donald Trump. And when Donald Trump this last time got elected, he spoke about him quite a bit on his show. And was very excited, interviewed him somewhere, and was just very excited about that. I didn't like Donald Trump, but I admired, I thought watching Sean Ryan, how he was behaving, because he was going to personally interview Donald Trump, was amazing, fun, actually. And then what changed, and I watched Sean Ryan some, but I wasn't a giant fan. I was a fan, but I wasn't a giant fan, especially once I found out he was MAGA. I was like, dang it. Because I know lots of military people that are just not MAGA at all. We all seem to remember our oaths, and Donald Trump doesn't believe in anything, not bigger than himself anyway. And that's when you take that oath for America, you're giving an oath to believe in something bigger than yourself for the rest of your life, because there's no expiration date on that oath. Nobody ever tells you that when you're 17 and taking it. But Sean Ryan, once Donald Trump didn't release the Epstein files, and then it became obvious that he was having Pam Bondi do a bunch of lawyer stuff and basically criminal stuff, even to keep those files under wraps, and only to release ones that were safe for Donald Trump and his buddies. Not one single child rapist was ever named that was in those files, except for one man, and it was obviously somebody that they could give them, like feeding the piranha so they'll go away, kind of a thing, or something. Sean Ryan is the only one that I've ever heard of he caught my attention when he did this, but he totally flipped his script. He realized that Sean Ryan realized that Donald Trump was not what he thought he was. He realized that Donald Trump was either protecting child rapists or was one, and protecting them. And Sean Ryan came out real strong against Donald Trump after that. After his 2020 election win, or his 2024 election win, rather. Sorry. And that amazed me, because I've not seen that before in a public figure. Okay, that takes a lot of integrity. That takes a lot of courage. It just makes sense to me that a person that was a Navy SEAL, lots of people can be a Navy SEAL, but most of them get in for one rotation and then they're done, because that's a tough job. It's not a job. It's a calling. And Sean Ryan was that for 14 years. And so the courage and the integrity you have to be able to be that, and it still got him. In the end, it still ate him up, and he had to leave. So I'm glad he made it through. In one piece, I'm glad he made it through without getting into big trouble. But the courage and integrity he showed by publicly supporting a person and then having to turn around and publicly say he was wrong, that is fucking courage. I know so many MAGA people that know better now. I know they do. I look at their faces, I see it. But they still have to defend him. And the reason is they just don't have the courage or the integrity to be able to say I was wrong. And yeah, I was willing to scrap. I was talking so good about the guy when you guys were all warning me. Everybody warned me, and I said you were all idiots, But Sean Ryan, no problem. That guy right there, courage up the wazoo. So I really admire him now. There are very few people like that in the world. Just to cap off my political stuff, I think that Captain Mark Kelly should be the next president. I know a lot of Democrats are looking at Newsom. Newsom wants everybody to look at Newsom, and he's a very smart guy. He runs the fourth or fifth largest economy in the entire world, doing pretty well that way. A lot of people complain about him, but there's no such thing as somebody that not being complained about. Jesus was complained about. Jesus was put to death by the other side. You know what I mean? There's always others. So anybody could. I'm not saying Mark Kelly's Jesus, by the way. I don't think he would want anybody to say that either. But Mark Kelly is a real badass, and he's got more courage than anybody I've ever imagined. I've read his bio. I've read a lot of things about him, most of which were not published by him. And he's just a very respectable person, and he's probably in a unique position, just like all the people over the years that I voted for, whether they were Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. He's probably in a unique position to bring the country back from where it is now. So when 2028, that's who I'll be voting for president, hopefully, if I'm around, if he's around. So that was Sean Ryan. So the next one is a young woman named Shay Hicks, and she lives in Oklahoma, or no, not Oklahoma, Kentucky. Sorry, in Hazard County. Okay, remember the Dukes of Hazzard? So she lives up a holler, which is what they call it. And all it means is it's in the sort of in the woods, but up up a road that kind of goes up in a direction in it, and when it's a holler, it's actually talked about. It's a geographical, topographical landscape kind of a thing. It's where two hills kind of come down into it, and there's usually a road that goes up it and houses on either side. Anyway, she lives in a holler. She comes from coal mining people. You can find her at Hey6, and it's just like on YouTube, it's at, and then let me spell that for you. Hey6 is because her name's Shay Hicks, I guess, but it's HAE because her name is Shay, so her name is SHAE, so it's at HAESICKS, and it's, I guess, because she has really bad hay fever. And so she has allergies, and she decided to do a kind of a twist on, like a play on words with her name and with the fact that she's allergy ridden in the summertime, spring and summer. She's fun. She likes to play up. She's from Appalachia, right, where she lives, and she always does kind of almost like lessons and stuff like that on what Appalachian people think and how they live and things like that. And she does funny stuff all the time, really comedic. She's not a specific comedian. She's a content creator, but she talks about the hillbilly word of the day, and then she'll have something that's fun and funny. She talks about all the things, that she grew up in. Her mom managed a Kentucky Fried Chicken store, and how embarrassing that was when her mom would come pick her up from school or something like that, and she was driving a vehicle that said Kentucky Fried Chicken outside or KFC on the side or something. I don't know. She's really pretty and she's really nice, and she's funny, and she does all kinds of things, just whatever suits her fancy. She was a dental hygienist, and something happened at her work, like the dentist that she worked for got arrested for murder or something like that, and she was already a bit of a content creator, and then she ended up being able to transition to that full time, and she's got a really strong following because she's just really funny, and I see posts from her at least once a day, something funny, and silly. And sometimes she's just dancing for the camera, like the TikTok people used to be doing all the time. She's got a bunch of dogs and stuff like that. Anyway, she's funny and she's fun. She teaches people how to cook Southern dishes, which it's funny because my father is Southern, very Southern, and his whole side of the family, deep South, might as well be related to those people. So she's got a really thick accent that my father used to have quite a bit of, and I love the things she cooks. That it's, you know, she calls it like Appalachian food or whatever, but it's all stuff that I heard of when I was a kid. That my mother was a Yankee and she didn't know anything about it. She had to get taught by my father's mother, my grandmother, how to cook these different things. Even things that my mom knew how to cook, like biscuits or whatever, she didn't cook them right because, you know, there was this whole Southern way of doing it. And my mom's biscuits, the only ones I've ever had that I remember, were from after she was educated, and they were awesome. I have to say that. I guess everybody loves their mother's biscuits, right? Or in your mother's potato salad. There's 8 million potato salads. Okay, so one last time, I'm gonna read out how to reach her on, see her on. You can probably even get her on Facebook, but I do most of my stuff on YouTube. YouTube is a better channel, in my opinion, or a better platform. So it's on YouTube. It's at the symbol at HAESICKS, Hay6. It's like hay fever, Hay6, and her name is Shay Hicks. So if you actually even Google her, or you know, ask AI, you know, who she is or whatever, it'll, I'm sure, direct you toward her because she's pretty popular. And there's two more, which are, they're not new to me. I've been fans of theirs for a couple of years now, but they're both in the Army, and or one's in the Marine Corps, one's in the Army. Sorry, they both wear a pickle suit, and the first one is named Austin. I don't know his last name. It's probably best he's wise for not. I mean, it says it right on his uniform, but it's something long, and I'm looking at it backwards, so I've never made it a point to figure out what it was. But his name's Austin, and he's an Army captain, I believe. He's unwisely about to rotate out. He's been in for like 15 years, but he's about to get out. He should do his 20. But he's an officer in the intelligence corps, so. He's an intelligence officer, and you know, there's a lot to that. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's interesting. And he does a bunch of comedy along with a bunch of news, and it's really fun for somebody who's spent any time in the military, because it's just all stuff that he'll say something and you're like, I remember that, you know, like. Everybody knows, you know, that spending time in the Army knows what a pogue is, right? Pogue actually stands for something, which I won't say. It's not a swear word, but it's not relevant to this because I was not an infantry person, and neither is Austin. He's not an infantry person either. So, but I do believe Austin must have been either in a Ranger battalion or at least went to Ranger school, because one of his things on his website is called Ranger Up, which is something we used to say a lot. Anyway, he's really funny, and it's his channel is called Mandatory Fun Day. So Mandatory Fun, and I think it's all one word. So Mandatory Fun Day. So Mandatory FUN Day, and he's rotating out early. He's like only got 15 years in because he's doing well enough with his content creation, which is, you know, you got to strike while the iron's hot. You got to make hay while the sun shines, and so, you know, he's able at the moment to do both, but at the same time, he's probably under a lot of pressure to be really careful and like apolitical and stuff like that. And so while he's a soldier, so when he gets out, he'll be able to say anything he wants to and stuff like that. I don't know that's why he's getting out at all. I have no idea where he falls politically. My guess is he is not a MAGA person because he doesn't sound like that at all. And he seems to be a nice, normal person. in other areas of life that he talks about and stuff like that. He's a pretty good leader. It sounds like, even though he's a young guy. But Mandatory Fun Day, a guy named Austin. I think he lives in Texas even. I doubt it's Austin, but I mean, I don't know where the hell he lives, to be honest. But he's stationed somewhere. You know, he's in the army currently. And the last guy is a guy named Kagan Dunlop. His name is spelled Kagan, and then Dunlop, Dunlop, or Dunlap, sorry. And I believe he's a Marine officer, and he does a news. His is less comedy, more news. Like, I don't think he does any comedy, in fact. And he has, and I know he's an officer. I don't know specifically what he does. He might be an intelligence officer. I don't know what specifically he does that way, but he has really interesting takes on a lot of things that are happening overseas at all times. Anything that's happening, like in the Middle East, I'm sure that he rotated there because he sure sounds like it. And I think he has a whole bunch of insider people giving him information so that he can report things kind of neutrally and all that kind of stuff. He's not MAGA either. But again, in the military, you have to be pretty apolitical. These days, it's tough on guys to do that, on people to do that, because they're being encouraged by their biggest boss to not be apolitical. But if you want to have the most fans and the most followers, you got to try to be apolitical, because if somebody was MAGA, hardcore MAGA, I probably wouldn't watch them, you know. And at the same time, if they were hardcore liberal, a bunch of all the MAGA people wouldn't watch them, even though there's not that many MAGA people these days. So anyway, Kagan Dunlop, and that's Kagan Dunlap. So that's my little rundown of my favorite creators. Thought I'd give you that. Okay, so this channel is called Still Working It Out, Life on the Road. If you found it accidentally, that's what it's called. If you ever want to like and subscribe, and that way you won't have to search for it or whatever. Whenever I post something, it'll just come up on your stuff. And you know, if you see it and you're like, oh, it's that guy, swipe. That's fine. I totally get that, believe me. I wish sometimes I could swipe myself and watch something else, but I'm stuck with me. So, Still Working It Out, Life on the Road. Please like and subscribe. It doesn't do anything for me. No, I've never gotten paid or anything for anything. Even though I've been doing this for a few years. I keep on evolving it a little bit. My show, my presentation. Sometimes it's educational. Sometimes it's just, you know, me talking. But in Still Working It Out, it's because I'm 57 years old and I still haven't figured out what I want to be when I grow up. You know, I've had just about every job you can have. I've never been a doctor, never been a surgeon, you know, a doctor. I can't say I've never been a psychologist because I used to work at a bar at one time, and everybody there came in and told me their problems all the time. In fact, several of them said that they stopped going to therapy because they had me for free, you know, just for the price of a beer. And I was like, all right, I'll give you that. Just tip me okay, you know. But had a lot of jobs in my time. Moved a lot when I was, you know, in my life. I figured this, I counted it out the other day and I told everybody, we moved 12 times before I was 16. 12 times. I had 4 different kindergartens, you know, in that year span when you're supposed to have a kindergarten. I had 4 of them. Give you an idea, we moved a lot. My dad had the bug. But there was a lot going on too. We were in the South. After my dad got out of the Navy, we were in the South, and if you think it was bad, like in Chicago or in LA with the riots and things like that, down south it was a whole other. It was their other direction. And my father was not a racist. And if you weren't racist back then down there, you didn't fit in. And he was most concerned. You know, you could keep your mouth shut in a crowd, you know, and you'd be fine. But he was most concerned about his kids turning that way. You know, that other kids would basically turn them into racists by his kids wanting to fit in like kids do. You know, all my my cousins and stuff down there. I have one cousin that she's so sweet, and she really lives her faith. But she does something that my father used to have to do, which is just be quiet and laugh when it was time to laugh and stuff like that. I don't know if she ever sticks up for, what she believes in, but she's not a racist. But everybody around her is. Everybody. And I'm not going to name her or anything like that, but I admire her so much because she's one of those people, like I tell her right now, she's less like her father and more like my father. Yeah. I loved her dad very much, but he struggled that way, He wanted to fit in, and he believed the things that most people around there believed in, All of his friends, whenever he saw them anywhere, I'm sure they all talked about the same thing. And if you didn't talk about that stuff, you wouldn't have fit in. Well, that's when my dad left that place. He took us away from that place in the 70s, in the early, 1970, brought us up north. And I never met tons of my cousins. I met one of my first cousins in the Army. I was stationed at Fort Gordon, Georgia, and I was hanging out with this dude about my age, same last name as me. That's somehow or another how we got to hanging out. We weren't in the same platoon or anything like that. I don't even know if we were in the same company, but saw each other somewhere, some group, maybe playing pool or something like that. And Underwood, I'm Underwood, and our uniforms give us away, and we thought that was funny. We was hanging out quite often. And one time I was calling home, talking to my mom on a payphone, and it was called Payphone City, and this guy was a ways down from me on a phone talking to his mom. And I was telling her about my life because I had just gotten there about a week before, and about my new buddy, and the same last name as me, Underwood. Oh, that's nice. What's his first name? And I said Clayton, and she said, Clayton Underwood? And I said, yeah. And she said, I think he's your cousin. That's your cousin. And I'm like, come on, give me a break, Mom. We're from Iowa. They're from wherever they're from. You think he's my cousin, huh? She said, that's Clayton Underwood is your cousin. That's your cousin's name. And she said, is he there? Is he around there? And I said, yeah, he's talking to his mom down the way. And she said, ask him a question for me. And I said, all right, whatever. What? And she said, ask him what's his mom's name. And on the phone, I'm like, hey, Clayton. He's like, what's up? And I said, my mom wants to know what's your mom's name? She thinks we're cousins. And he laughed and he said, here's Mom's name. And I told my mom, she said, that's your dad's sister. And I'm like, because I never met a ton of my dad's family. We took 2 vacations down there my whole life. He didn't get along with his sisters. His littlest sister, Wanda, was a baby, and he loved her. Everybody loved her, and she didn't have a personality yet when he basically left. But his sisters that were closer to in his age, they did not get along at all. When my mom met him, he had just gotten a divorce from his wife that was from there, and so yeah, there was, and you weren't supposed to get divorced. Very Southern Baptist, they were wrong about everything in religion because you could be religious and at the same time be racist. But that was one of the things you didn't do, and so they never liked my mom. And once they never liked my mom, my dad was like, you guys are out of the picture. And so he moved us up north, and then we moved to the West Coast even. And yeah. So I had a whole different upbringing than those guys. Ooh, a cardinal. They're around here like crazy, but I don't see them very often. There's a big red cardinal in the tree out front. Yeah, he just flew off. Oh, he's just next door. Anyway, what was I even saying? I have no idea anymore. But that's good. I was probably rambling about something stupid. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that Oh, by the way, I was saying this. If you like and subscribe, what happens is whenever I post a new video, it pops up on your feed someplace. You'll see it. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, somebody said that they liked my voice because it was soothing or something. One time, some old guy told me on the CB back when I was working a job that I was on CB a lot. He said that I sounded like the Lone Ranger. I'm like, well, you got half of that right, because I was by myself. But anyway, so on to this next thing. If you like and subscribe, by the way, you'll see me more often and stuff. And eventually, I don't know. Apparently, there's a number that YouTube likes. If it adds up, one day I'll make $1. You know, I don't know. That's not my goal. I don't intend to be a creator. But if somebody started sending me money, I wouldn't mind. I'm just saying. If you're a rich person that just like when you cough, money falls out kind of a thing, send me some. I don't mind. You know. At the same time, I don't want anybody to have to go without. Because send me anything, because I'm not going without. Look at me. I'm definitely not missing meals. But I recently wrote a paper, an article, and I posted it on. I did post it on Facebook just because I'm on Facebook and stuff. But it was too long. You know, it's something that I can't imagine anybody really reading on Facebook. So I also posted it on Substack. And it's a serious article, and I'm not a frothing at the mouth like liberal. Like my mom was hardcore. Like, you know, she used to be a Republican, and then she switched when she went to college, and pissed off my grandparents. They're like, "Why'd you switch?" And she said, "Because I got an education." But anyway. The paper I wrote is on Substack, and it's called Donald Trump and actually maybe I'm not going to look at it now, but it's about Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein's connection to the KGB and the GRU. I some things in my past, you know, my time in the military, I had the highest security clearance you can get in the military. It just so happened. When I got into my AIT, which is the initial training after basic training, I was there for 3 months waiting for them to clear me, which means waiting for them to give me a security clearance to do my particular job, which I never, you know, I was just in a signal unit. And just, I mean, some guys in a signal unit are a diesel mechanic, you know, like a generator mechanic, you know, or what we called cable dogs and stuff. But I was in what was called patch panel, and there were only 2 jobs in the signal besides in command. They had to have a big security clearance, and mine was one of them. And I was told at the time when I went through school that only 85 people a year got my cleared to have my job. Which I was an 18-year-old kid. I was like, interesting. That's, you know, a lot. You know, a lot of people applying for something, and to only have 85 people in the entire United States military get that job. And but I had what's called a TSSCI, and it's top secret, compartmentalized, segmented information. And it's kind of one of those things where that even if you were a trader and wanted to sell information, you don't know the whole picture. You only know a little piece of it, segmented and compartmentalized. And so you'd have to have a whole bunch of people get together that happen to know all the different pieces to actually be useful information. It's one of the ways that our country does a really, really good job of security, usually. But over time, back then I used to hear things, you know, and the things I heard most was when we worked in conjunction with Mossad, which is the Israeli intelligence group, and I was privy to something that Mossad did back then that I couldn't make heads or tails out of it, to be honest. I knew what I was doing, I knew the implications of what I was doing, but I heard something, and you know, I was listening in on something, and that was one of my jobs. In the civilian world, or in peacetime rather, that's one of my jobs, and that was one of my jobs, was listening for people um, misusing communication, like saying things they shouldn't on secure lines, that kind of stuff. And we would get like 5 different numbers that this scanner would scan constantly, those 5 different numbers, until something happened on one of them. And it was a boring fucking job, because we would sit there and just listen and listen and listen and read a book while we were listening, and read a book, play cards with ourselves, while we were listening. And then when somebody picked up one of those lines, which happened on a regular basis, like people using their normal telephone, to who knows what, talk to their wife, order pizza, who knows. And on one of those, I'm not going to tell you everything, because it would still just be wrong. But a fellow picked up the phone, and I had on these 5 different phone numbers, I had 5 different alerts to listen for, and in case of one thing, like if they said one thing, I was supposed to actually interrupt, where that they could, I would push a button and they would be able to hear me, and I would say, this is not a secure line, end the transmission right now. And that would be the worst case scenario, basically. But if they picked up and started talking about anything of the subject that I was on alert for, I push a button, and then somebody somewhere would tap in, would start listening, and then they would take over. So it wasn't really high end. It wasn't 007. It wasn't any of that kind of stuff. I was just listening for some people doing some stupid shit, and that people were already suspicious of, or whatever, they were being watched. And an incident happened during that, the only time ever an incident happened, and the call was interrupted by some weird noise. And then years and years later, well after the military, I was watching TV on something, and it was some program where they were talking about incidences, and there was a show about something called The Big Gun, and it was an engineering show or something, where that they were talking about this one engineer. It was a weapons engineer. He just had this thing he really, really wanted to make. It was a gigantic cannon. I mean, it was gigantic. You could stand in it, kind of a thing. It was so big, it had to be built on the side of a hill. It could only ever be aimed at this one thing, because it was a big cannon it would be put together in sections, and it would be pointing in the same direction, because it was built on a hill. I don't know if it was ever designed to be able to rotate at all, a little bit even, but the idea was, if you shot something at something, instead of having it travel like at jet speed, instead it's traveling the speed of a bullet. It makes it harder to shoot down. There's no heat signature from like a jet engine kind of a thing, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, it was called The Big Gun. And he tried to get the United States to fund it, to build it for America. He was American. And they said no, they didn't see an actual application for it that made sense. Then he tried to get the Canadians to do it, and the Canadians said the same thing. They didn't have, it wasn't realistic. They didn't have an application for it. That everything that they would build, that anybody would really build in a military sense, would have to be something that would be movable and aimable. And his idea was, he just wanted to see it. I think he just wanted to see it go off once to see what it would do, right? But he had to have somebody fund it, and he finally got around to the Iranians. And the Iranians said, "Fuck yeah, come on over. We'll help you, and we'll fund it. You build it right here. We'll aim it at Israel, at Tel Aviv or something, and we'll pay for it. You do everything. We'll put all the engineers on it you need and stuff." And this was this television show I was watching. The concept for me, I was just interested in the engineering factor. The concept of building something like that was as fascinating to me as it was to him, except he was looking at it from the mathematical physics, standpoint. I was looking at it from the, drooling kid watching Star Trek, whatever. viewpoint. And anyway, he went to Belgium. He went from Canada, I guess, to Belgium, where he was making contact with the Iranians, and then he was going to, basically formulate a contract, sign it, get them to sign it. And once he was confident that everything was peachy, then he would be going to Iran. Except that, and here's how the show caught my attention. The show then said, and the man was on the phone with somebody, and then Mossad agents that had been watching him broke into his apartment and shot him. And they showed a reenactment with like actors, and it showed a little kill squad, a little like 4-man squad come in with suppressed weapons, all wearing black head to toe, and they killed his ass, while he was holding the phone. And I was doing like the RCA dog. I'm like, what? That rings a weird bell, So that event, I would have never. I mean, interesting TV, neat TV. It would have never been a thing to anybody except I was there. I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it, and the details kept on from the show that I just watched, and then this incident from back in the 80s, and things kept on matching up and coming together, and I'm like, holy shit, I was there. I was on the phone. I remember that. I didn't remember, I didn't know what that sound was. It was conversation over, I wasn't talking, and I never was talking. I didn't interrupt or anything. But I was alerting. I was in the middle of alerting people about it, and a good 5 minutes had gone by, since I alerted people that it was a worst case scenario. He was talking about bad things to the wrong people, and the wrong people was really simple. Here's a guy with an American accent talking to somebody with a Middle Eastern accent, and it was the thing I was being alerted about, the subject I was being alerted about. He was speaking English. So I pushed the correct button, for that. And as far as I knew, the next thing was somebody would pick up the phone, and start listening, and then relieve me of duty, and I'd be over and done with it. Basically, I'm a lesser important person than that person, kind of a thing. And I was just the one sitting there being bored, and I was listening for 5 different things. That's just one of them, right? But anyway, I was involved in that call. Weird, huh? So anyway, incidences like that back in the day shaped how I think. And so I wrote this paper when things have been going on, and I've been noticing things, and I watch a lot of news type stuff rather than opinion type stuff. I watch some opinion stuff too, but not much. I don't like to get into an echo chamber type of thing, because I know that that's how it's all set up for everybody on every side of things. And I read about this guy that said that the Jeffrey Epstein thing was way more, and I already had these suspicions. I'd been already kind of writing about it, and not writing about it publicly, but putting it together in like a journal of gathering information, just something that was interesting to me. And anybody knows about me knows that I've been unemployed for quite some time because of MS. And so bored, and I do a lot of that kind of stuff. Then some other stuff came out about Jeffrey Epstein, and then I steadily started, kind of, putting it together, sort of like that other incident. That I do that a lot. I just walk into stupid things like that other people would be wisely, brilliantly figuring out. I just stumble into it. But anyway, it's a paper on Substack. It's called Donald Trump's connection with the KGB and the SVR. I think I said. I was incorrect though. It wasn't the SVR. It would have been the GRU. So even though the title is Donald Trump's connection with the KGB and SVR. So in Russia, when the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 90s, the KGB never went away. They had lots of irons in the fire. They weren't exactly, they were lifers, and they had really important to them. I mean, these people didn't do it for the money. They did it because it was their thing, And so they didn't stop. They didn't dissolve. They reorganized. So instead of the KGB just being the KGB we know of, they split into 3 sections. One was called the FSB, one's called the SVR, and the other one's called the GRU. And in my paper, I explain what they are. The GRU is the KGB's military intelligence branch, and they're known for being highly aggressive, and they're the killers. When you send out, imagine CIA people that are just a kill team or killers, individuals. That's the GRU. When people were to get killed on American soil by spies, it was the GRU involved. There was a really interesting show called The Americans. It was an actual TV show, but it was depicting actual events, not all the details, but the Americans talked about really clandestine operations where that they were sending people that were immersively trained in American culture by people with American accents, and then they were sent to the United States as Americans, with false documents, all that kind of stuff, and then they were taught all kinds of things, and so they would learn how to get real documents, start real businesses, have real lives, have kids, pretend they're married, kind of a thing, and then do tons and tons of operations all over the Washington, usually in the East Coast where Washington was, the centers of American power and influence. That was very interesting, kind of an eye-opening thing too. Just a piece of information that I used. So I would love to have your opinion on that. It's called Donald Trump's connection to the KGB and VS or SVR. That's what it is. Yeah. Then the next thing I wanted to cover is, so this video has been an hour. So I tell you what, I'm going to kill this video and I'm going to start a new one. That way you can, and this will be the part 1, and the next one will be the part 2. So I'm going to start a new one because I still have a little bit of information that I wanted to cover. So not about that, something totally different. So anyway, hey, you guys, I love all of you. Everybody that watches me is a nice person. Even if you don't believe the same things I do, that's fine with me. That's perfectly fine with me. No, it'd be like a family with one parent. Every family that has 2 parents has 2 different kinds of people raising kids or whatever, right? The country has to have 2 different kinds of people running the country. That's why the Congress is made the way it was. That's why the separation of powers was made the way it was. That's why there's at least 2 political parties. One political party does not work. It's tough when there's 22. So 2 at least, because they're opposites and they balance each other when things are running right. Right now we're a little imbalanced, and that's what's causing a lot of problems. But I'm not on either direction. I will say things moved on me. I used to be in the middle. Now I look like I'm on the left a little bit, but I'm not far left. I'm not a drooling frothing at the mouth, one to claw Republicans' eyes out. I just want everything to work, and everybody's opinion is important to me. Some people that talk the loudest, and stuff like that, are usually coming at it from the wrong direction, and I just let them do their thing because I know that's they're having an emotional response to something, and so I don't have, I try not to make it worse. So if you've got stuff to say, I'm cool with that. If you got criticism for me, please tell me. Most the most educational stuff I've ever had is when has been somebody being critical of something I'm doing. You know, it can't be roses and sunshine all the time. All the time. Sometimes people have to say, "Man, you're ugly," or whatever, and there's not much I can do about that. But I could wear a mask or a bag, or have a couple of eyes holes, whatever. I don't do the hood thing. I'm against that. Black Lives Matter, buddy. Anyway, I'm gonna let you guys go before it's too much more than an hour. And I love you all, everybody, no matter what your political bent is, no matter what your background is, no matter what you've done in your life. you know, we're all just doing, every single human being ever is doing their very best to get through life. It's survival. Even if you're doing well, you're still in survival mode. You're just surviving well. Okay? Everybody's just doing their best. So don't forget that. You're not worse than anybody. You're not better than anybody. Really, there's no such thing as better than anybody. There's luckier, because you can plan your life out. The old joke is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I'm here to tell you right now, I've experienced when I have the wrong idea than what's supposed to happen. Period. We're living a program, and it has to happen a certain way. No matter what you think you have, free will, you do not. It has to be a certain way. You're never ever lost. You're always exactly where you're supposed to be. You're either figuring something out, or your absence, or whatever. Something's happening that's supposed to be happening. And so no matter how crappy you feel about your life, or how you think you add up, or how you think you're doing with your children, all the mistakes you think you've made, all the bad choices you feel like you've made, all the opportunities you didn't take, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. And it was all meant to guide people around you that you didn't even know that were even looking at you at times, and to put you in a position to do exactly what you were supposed to do, period. And I've never had kids and stuff. I've always gotten to do a lot of self-reflection. I've been a voracious reader. I can't say I've read a bunch of really fun books like Stephen King and all kinds of things like that. Oscar Wilde, things like that. But most of my reading in my life has all been all about biographies and of interesting people, or about things that I consider wisdom. And I've learned a lot in my time, things that a lot of people don't get to because they have huge distractions, like a demanding family, kids that have to be taken care of. They have to go to work every day at a certain job, and whether they like it or not, that son of a bitch at work that's pissing them off, they got to keep that job because those kids need braces or whatever. I've never had that. I've been lucky. I've been like an 18-year-old my whole life, and I'm 57. I've had a lot of chance to think, and I'm really lucky for that. But I've learned this in that time. Whatever you think mistakes you've ever made, you did not make any mistakes. You just followed orders. And you didn't know you were even following orders. Even times when you thought you were being lazy, you were doing the exact thing you were supposed to do. Right? So, whatever you think about yourself, whatever you think about your life, one, it could always be worse. Okay? There's terrible things that happen to people all the time. But no matter how bad it can be, no matter how bad you got, it could always be worse. And I challenge anybody watching this, if you're still around, you're a badass. But if you can think of something that I can't tell you how it could be worse, I'll give you $100. Tell me something that is as bad as it gets, and I will tell you how it could be worse. Yep. Because it's true. I used to play this game with all my people that worked for me when they were having a bad day or complaining about their life, or just not feeling appreciated or whatever. I would tell them about how it could be worse. And the biggest thing there. That way is that somebody else somewhere else has got it worse than you. I guarantee you. Sorry, a kid walked by. Kid at 6:30 in the morning. What the hell is that kid doing up? Anyway, it's the summertime, by the way. My whole point about this is don't give up. Don't give up. Never give up. I put a gun in my mouth one time, a long time ago. I was in my 20s, and I thought life was over. I thought life was terrible. Nothing was working right. Everything was working wrong. I kept on getting kicked in the teeth by life, one time after another, really bad stuff. One time after another, nothing worked out. And I was by myself. I was lonely, and I just was in pain, tons of pain. And I was in a bad place, real bad place. And I put a 45 in my mouth. Took it out of the holster. I always kept it chambered, and I put that gun in my mouth, and I was thinking about pulling the trigger. And I would just be instantly done. And I'd just be asleep for the rest of my life. No dreams. You know? And I chose not to. I wasn't afraid of it. I've never ever been afraid of death. I don't know why, but I just realized this pain will stop. It'll stop. There's more living to do. There are people that have it worse than I do. See, I had started that game with people that worked for me before that. Luckily, in my teens, I was in charge of people in the military, and then later in work life. And I didn't give up. I almost did, but I didn't. Today, while people are killing themselves right and left, that's a big deal. Never. That's the only mistake you could ever make, is giving up. Don't give up. Don't give up. Think your way out of stuff. Work the problem. Work the problem. Anyway, I love everybody. I hope you have a great day. And this was section 1. My God, it's been 72 minutes. Sorry. I'll repost in a minute.